Welcome to Peculiar Stories, where we explore the fascinating world of near-death experiences and offer new perspectives on the meaning of life and death. Our goal is to shed light on these profound stories, deepen your understanding of life, and provide valuable insights to our audience. Whether you're new here or simply joining us again, we're thrilled to have you on this journey. If you enjoy what we do, consider subscribing to our channel to stay updated on our latest content, and don't forget to hit the like button to help our content reach a wider audience. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be transported to the edge of life and beyond. On April 23, 2010, I was in a fatal car wreck on the highway. I was T-boned at the intersection, wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and was thrown across the car, breaking my pelvis on the gear stick. I slammed my head on the passenger door armrest, which caused a severe, traumatic brain injury and lacerated my temporal artery, almost bleeding to death. I have no memory of the accident itself or the roughly 5 weeks I spent in the hospital in both critical care and inpatient rehab. I had terrible short-term memory loss issues that still plague me some to this day. I was non-weight-bearing for months due to my hip injury. The first time I spoke of the NDE was 5 days after the wreck. My brother and aunt were in my hospital room at the hospital. My brother had read that playing music was good for TBI patients because of how strongly music is tied to memory. He would sit by my bed for hours playing old favorite songs, etc. At this moment, he was playing my favorite hymn, In the Garden, performed by Willie Nelson. I used to hear it all the time as a boy while riding in the car with my grandfather. I hadn't said more than a few words together yet, and suddenly I began crying. My brother and aunt asked me what was wrong. I said, "I'm not crying because I'm sad. I'm crying because I'm happy. God and His Son have been hugging and holding me all week long. Jesus Christ touched my scalp and healed it." My brother and aunt were jaw-dropped, shocked, and ran out of the room to waiting area to others to tell them that I could talk and what I had just said. According to my family, while at the hospital, I would often talk about seeing heaven, seeing my deceased paternal grandparents, and seeing and talking to Jesus. I am unable to recall doing this due to my short-term memory issues. When I was released to outpatient care, I stayed in my old bedroom from childhood. I was given a prescription of nerve pain medication to help ease symptoms of the brain injury. One of the side effects was very vivid lucid dreaming. I didn't dream dreams, though. I would dream often of memories from my time in the hospital that I could not consciously recall. I would tell the dreams to my father, and he would reassure me that was a real event, but I can't remember it because the brain is repairing itself and establishing new neural pathways. All that information is in there. I am just now processing it. I had one final memory dream. I called my dad, who is a cardiologist, to come home and talk to me. He and I sat out on the porch, and I began to tell him I had a memory dream that was the most lucid and real I had ever had. I was looking down at my body on a hospital gurney. I had the respirator tube down my throat. There was blood all over me. I told my dad, "You were lying on the floor beside my gurney." My dad began to turn white. He said, "Son, you were unconscious and unable to breathe on your own. I refused to leave your side once I got back to you, and I just laid on the floor next to your gurney while waiting. There's no way for you to know that. I've never spoken of it." I turned to my right, and Granny and Pappy were there. They are his deceased grandparents. I asked, "What are you doing here?" They said, "We're here to protect you." At this statement, my dad began crying harder than I'd ever seen him cry in my life. He said, "Son, after we got the call about your wreck, your mother and I were flying down the highway. I was driving and panicked. I had an out-of-body experience while driving. I saw this frantic man driving and thought he needs to calm down. Repeatedly, all that man, that was me, could shout was, 'Mama and Daddy, find him and protect him.'" He said, "I've never spoken of it since, but you repeated verbatim what I was praying to them." He asked about them. My granny died in 1987 when I was only a little over 1 year old, and my grandfather died in 2001 when I was 14. I said they both looked young, like in their late 20s. Even though I'd never seen them alive like that, the instant I saw them both, I knew exactly who they both were. They felt just as familiar to me as my family that had been with me in life. They were dressed differently. I would later learn this was kind of how you could tell how long someone had been in heaven. My granny was wearing a white robe-like, almost stereotypical angelic garb. Yet, my pappy was wearing a button-down shirt and pants still earth-like. They both had a glow or aura to them. My granny had a stronger and brighter one than pappy's. Later, they would take me to heaven, and I would see in the multitudes of people, angelically and earth-dressed people with various levels of glows or auras. He asked all of a sudden, we were no longer in the hospital room. We were in a gray void, no features visible, and maybe like a gray cloud. We suddenly came upon a convertible-like vehicle that, for lack of a comparison, resembled a floating gondola above the gray floor. We got in, Pappy drove while Granny sat with me with her arm around me, reassuring me. My father said, "You talked about this in the hospital, that it didn't have a motor. It just moved and made a whooshing sound as it went." I said, "Yes, that's right." We began going somewhere. Again, suddenly, a hole opened up at the top of the gray void and red light poured through as a menacing vehicle-like thing came through. It looked like a train that flew, and it was pulling dozens of cars of cages with people in them. The people were being tortured by demonic beings. I could feel their thoughts and feelings. On the other side, I call it instant comprehension. You just look at something and immediately know everything about it. I knew when I looked at them that these were wicked, evil people on their way to hell. The feeling I could hear the most from their thoughts was anger at God for punishing them, feeling sorry for themselves, but not feeling any remorse or longing for forgiveness. I also knew by looking, even then as they were on their way to hell, if they truly felt remorse and begged for forgiveness, God would forgive and free them. But their anger, self-pity and pride wouldn't let them. Suddenly, a hole opened up at the bottom of the gray void, and the train vehicle went down it and it sealed up behind it. Pappy kept driving, and we came over a hill. I saw the most breathtakingly beautiful sight I have ever seen. I saw heaven in all its glory. There aren't words to describe how awesome and magnificent it is. The colors are radiant, and there's colors there that don't exist on Earth. My dad told me I talked about this in the hospital. I described towers of gold that went up into the clouds and out of sight. The picture towers were 100 times larger than the Empire State Building and made of pure gold. As we rode into heaven, it was like being downtown in a busy city. People were all walking around, going to places, had the look of purpose to them. No one was idle. All types of people, not just Christians. There were gay and straight people too. Some were dressed in robes, others earth-like attire. We drove up to a ridge, parked, and got out of the vehicle. There was a cloud-like object in the distance with radiant colored light coming from it. I heard the loudest, most booming voice I have ever heard. I don't know if it was aloud or in my head or both. As it spoke, every hair on my body stood up, and I felt tingly, like electric surges running up and down me. The instant comprehension let me know, as soon as it spoke, it was the voice of God. Nobody had to tell me, since I knew as soon as I heard it. It was in a language I couldn't understand and had never heard before. But I knew it was the language of God. As soon as he stopped speaking, I knew to turn and look at my grandparents. They both told me they loved me and that I would be okay. I turned and saw a golden, double-sliding door. I walked up to it, and the door opened on its own. I stepped inside. I felt it silently going down. It stopped moving. When the doors opened, I could see a man seated on a chair in the far end of the room. I took 3 steps forward and caught sight of his eyes. They were light brown with a bright golden amber hue to them. The man was large, muscular, olive-skinned complexion with long black curly hair. I knew immediately it was Jesus. His size and strength were consistent with being a carpenter in ancient Israel. Of course, he would be big, strong, and look Middle Eastern. At that moment, I realized that I was truly dead, and that it was Judgment Day for me. I dropped to my hands and knees and began crying, begging for forgiveness, trying to name each sin I'd committed. Jesus began laughing, but not meanly. He was laughing like a parent would at a child that spilled chocolate milk on the carpet, knew they weren't supposed to be in there, went to parents crying and owned up to it knowing they were going to get a spanking. And it is so pitiful that a parent can only laugh. He said aloud, "You don't think I know who you are?" I shut up and stood. He looked at me. I heard him in my head without his mouth moving. "I know everything about you." He then cocked his head slightly to the side and squinted slightly and said, "Your biggest and only sin is you don't appreciate the natural beauty in the world. You have no idea how hard God and I work each and every day to make beautiful things happen and appear, from a cloud or rainbow in the sky to a small flower. You never appreciate it, thank us for it. You never even think to." In that moment, I was 23 at the time and in college. I had been in a fraternity and partying a lot. I thought I had to be dreaming if my biggest sin was not appreciating natural beauty. Watch this near-death experience next about a woman who had a mind-bending story with so much insight, you simply don't want to miss it.